Every piece of content that people consume, from books to movies to, in this case, video games, have one goal in mind for their audience: hook the consumer within the first 5 minutes of consumption. The Great Gatsby starts with a single sentence that interests the reader into going further into the rabbit hole. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. With that single sentence, the consumer wants to read on. They want to know what advice the protagonist, Nick Carraway, is going to give and how it's going to lead him forward in the coming novel. Citizen Kane starts its film off with a single word: Rosebud. Other than the most well known single word quote in film history, it also tells the audience that Charles Foster Kane held this rosebud in high regard. I don't think I'm spoiling this for many people, but the rosebud in question ends up being his sleigh. That sleigh was the thing that made him happy in his childhood and was the last time he truly was happy. On a fairly different note, Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a game infamously known throughout the gaming community as an endurance test of will. Making it through this game isn't like The Legend of Zelda, where you can potentially even beat the game without losing a single life. Maybe not the originals, though. It's a challenge of your mental and physical health, since many have hundreds of hours logged into the series. Not to mention, Dark Souls literally has a statue dedicated to how many people have died. To start, let's talk about the beginning of Dark Souls games, specifically 1, 2, and 3. Dark Souls 1 has a very gloomy beginning, as you're pretty much thrown into a jail cell, and you look like shit. Early on, you get better weapons while learning about the basics of the game. Little tiny orange slash marks tell the player of the basics while throwing you into the fray almost immediately. After learning the basics, you're thrown against the Asylum Demon, an enemy that will be your guide into this nightmarescape of a game. The Asylum Demon wields a big ass hammer, so your best bet is to go into it with little strikes and then avoid his giant mallet. And then you win, and you leave the prison, ready to start the real nightmare. In terms of the three games, this one is my second favorite, as it does a good job of introducing the basics, while giving you no time to learn them. The vibe is gloomy, the music's somber, with the Asylum Demon have a fast-paced soundtrack, one that keeps you on your feet while dodging his megaton hammer. One thing to also note is that all the starting areas have a reason for going back to them, which is great. I also forgot to mention that each game starts with a cutscene. Unlike most games, the information is scarce in these three titles, and context clues pave the way for a grander story. All you know is that you're unkindled, and you're facing eldritch horrors that'll make you cry, rage, and jump for joy when their corpses disappear forever. Anywho, Dark Souls 2 begins with a cutscene of the protagonist being flushed down a tornado waking up in a forest. You talk to the first women you come in contact with. Unlike the first game, where you fight before talking, you make your character, then proceed into a darkly lit forest, learning the tutorial, and then leaving. Note how the forest is very dark, and a standout feature of the first area in the game. The tutorial, in my opinion, ends once you speak to the woman by the bonfire in Majula. Majula, by the way, is easily one of the prettiest areas in the whole series. To come out of the darkness and into the light is very unique. It's rewarding, but it can suck. There's not much to say about Dark Souls 2's intro. It's pretty simple, and it follows a lot of conventions that a lot of other games do, but it's still a pretty good intro. The real reason I'm making this particular video, however, is to talk about Dark Souls 3's intro. Dark Souls 3 has an intro filled to the brim with interesting things to talk about. For starters, you wake up from under the ground with clothes on and ready to save or doom the world once again. The tutorial proceeds similarly to the old game, but as you get to the end of the first area, you're offered a split path. You could go forward towards the light, or you could take the right and head towards the crystal-like monster, guarding something very interesting. Either way, multiple paths reward the player for exploration, and set up a precedent for the future of the game. In similar fashion to Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3 has the player exit the womb, see shitty analogy above, into a vast land of castles, mountains, and fog. The fog, interestingly enough, kind of resembles the fog doors you use to face bosses. Fog is looming over you constantly, and so are the threats of the enemies ahead. Once you take out some enemies, get some loot, and head into the arena above, you know shit's going down. Against all your basic instincts, you pull the sword from the statue before you, unleashing a giant knight by the name of Ludex Gunder. The first half of the boss goes fairly smoothly, as you're utilizing the knowledge you've learned from the first 5 minutes to take on the man before you. Then, things dial up to 11. Suddenly a beast bursts from Ludex's back, and he turned into an eldritch abomination. The second half of the fight requires careful timing and patience, since your charging will have you on your ass. Ludex Gundyr, in my opinion, is the perfect first boss, presenting the player with both a challenge and a precedent for future bosses. Trust all the people who can tell you how hard this game is. It took me 6 tries to beat Ludex Gundyr, and I've beaten Dark Souls 1 and 2. The tutorial ends with a much needed bonfire and a path towards the next area. This, in my opinion, is my second favorite HUD of the 3 games, next to Majula as number 1. However, both hubs are different since Majula feels like a safe haven from a scary world, and the shrine in 3 makes you feel like you're being stepped on by giants, as shown by the giant seats that were once occupied by the Lords of Cinder. Taking the bonfire leads you to the undead settlement where the tutorial ends. The tutorials of many games do tell you how to play the game, rather than allow you to learn how to play, but that's not a bad thing. Every Nintendo game teaches you how to play at some point, even if it does feel like it's choking you. Manuals are there for a reason. For the experienced Dark Souls player, guides are unnecessary since they all work the same way, pretty much. Dark Souls is a series that rewards trying new things, so never feel like diverging from the main path is a bad thing. In Dark Souls 3, that crystal monster is there to deter you from getting behind it. However, it can only try to stop you from getting behind it and see what lies ahead. How would Zelda games be if they were linear and had no hidden paths? The Dark Souls games, along with many other games, have good tutorial levels. Dark Souls 2 is probably the weakest, since it doesn't have a final area boss, nor does it really make you feel scared. Majula, in fact, make things more calm and peaceful compared to the shrines from 1 and 3. Dark Souls 1 is great because of the depressing vibe it gives off. It's not supposed to be all merry and happy, but rather the asylum is depressing and dark. You may think the raven at the end of the area is salvation, but it's only another stone in your path. Dark Souls 3, in my opinion, is a near perfect tutorial since it keeps its dark vibe throughout, never feeling safe in the shrine. Being buried alive is a perfect allegory for the series as a whole. You're only safe once you've won the game, and even then, that's debatable.